Welcome to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. We are physically located on the lands of the Chichimeca, Otomi, and Nawa people. But today we are Zooming and making community with people from near and far, including Canada and the US. We are fortunate to gather in a loving community where you can bring your whole self, your full identity, to explore your beliefs and share in fellowship. UUs like to say, come as you are. We hope you don't leave that way. My name is Cathy Cánepa, and I'm a member of the Sunday Service Committee and the Committee on Ministry, and I have the privilege of being service leader for us today. You can learn more about what's going on in this fellowship and how you can become involved by going to our website, UUFSMA.org, UUFSMA.org. Now, we have an announcement today from our endowment committee. In 2 weeks, they are hosting a fellowship-sponsored two-part seminar for US and Canadian citizens on charitable giving. It will cover tax-effective charitable giving strategies that can benefit your estate, your loved ones, and the causes that you believe in, and tell you how to donate Mexican assets. Again, see our website or your order of service from today for details. And information on how to register will be posted in the chat box shortly. After the service today, please stay connected and you will be assigned to a breakout room. If there are only a few people, just wait, sit tight, and you will be reassigned to a larger group. You can either accept this assignment or, especially if you're new, stay in the main room to chat with members of our visitor and membership team. And now let's go to Donna to give us a COVID update.
Good morning, UUs. I'm Donna Shubrooks, a nurse on our COVID-19 task force. Happy 4th of July to our American friends, and a belated Happy Canada Day to our Canadian UUs. And since there is no Mexican holiday in the month of July, I'll say Happy Sunday to our Mexican neighbors and friends. In Mexico, the next rollout of vaccines will be offered in San Miguel tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday, July 5th and 6th. This is for 40 years old and up. And remember, this is the first doses only. It's not for people getting their second dose of vaccines. Please check the COVID-19 SMA Facebook page for details, and you don't have to be on Facebook to do this. Plus, you will probably receive a email announcement about this for the UU email address book. This will be the AstraZeneca vaccine. And in the future, any second doses of vaccines that you receive, remember, always have to be the same brand as the first dose you got. There is still conflicting information about mask wearing. Things can differ depending on where you live in the whole world. The San Miguel Task Force still recommends mask wearing in all public spaces. Transportation, walking on the streets, in stores and businesses, hospitals and airports. More than half of the people in Mexico are not vaccinated. And so we are modeling respect and care for others by mask wearing. It is the UU thing to do. For the next rollout, please encourage registration for those in their 30s and do all you can to assist those 40 and up who are eligible this week to be vaccinated for their first dose. If you have gardeners, housekeepers, cooks, or caregivers who may need transportation to vaccine sites, please offer that or pay for them to use taxi services if needed. Also, driver volunteers are especially needed this week. So please check the link in the chat box that you will see to help if you can. Some good news about our own fellowship plans coming up. On Thursday, August 26th at 6:30 p.m. is the date for Bienvenidos Musical, a social gathering outdoors at the Aldea, with some of our very favorite musicians performing. In the following weeks, there will be several small group gatherings at people's homes for personal sharing with a spiritual tone. Watch your emails for announcements about those. And on Sunday, October 24th, there will be the first In-Gathering Sunday, where the fellowship will come together in person in the Aldea. We have long awaited this opportunity, and it should be great. And now Cathy Cánepa will light our chalice and share our opening words. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. These are the first two of our 7 UU principles. Our esteemed speaker today, Bruce Knotts, will teach us how we as a religion have tried to make these principles a reality for people across the world, and how we can live our principles going forward. I think we UUs try our best to live these values, but recent events in the news have reminded me how easy it is to be blinded to others outside our own small circle of life. It's good to be made aware, especially on this 4th of July weekend. From the 19th century, in Canada, Alaska, and the lower United States, thousands of Indigenous children were forced to leave their families and attend state-funded, often Christian schools. They had to convert, were not allowed to speak their native languages. Many were beaten and verbally abused. It was a policy of cultural genocide. A light is now focused particularly on Canada, where mass graves of many hundreds of Indigenous children have been discovered at the sites of these defunct boarding schools. The children were disposable. We mourn these horrors, but let us also be angered into consciousness of the current struggles of Indigenous peoples. Let us help each other to shake off society's teachings to dehumanize the other and the most pernicious belief that change is not possible. As Naomi Klein has said, the idea that we humans cannot do what is required to confront the many overlapping and intersecting crises plaguing our world because it's just too much, was always a lie, a convenient myth peddled by those in whose interest it is for things to remain the same. May we light this chalice, a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, to help awaken our imaginations to see that deep change is and always was possible. And now, our fellowship is a proud contributor to the Unitarian Universalist Office at the United Nations, the UUNO. The following video was created in 2012. It is an introduction to it, and it was done in celebration of the 50th anniversary of our UU, United Nations Office.
Hi, I'm Andre Brouwer. Throughout the recorded history of life on Earth, freedom from the violence and destruction of war and the continuing search for human rights and social justice have eluded us. While the prophets long ago admonished us to beat our swords into plowshares, the dream of peace on earth and goodwill among all peoples has continued to challenge, and often frustrate our best intentions and highest aspirations. And yet, in 1945, soon after World War II, the United Nations Conference on International Organization began in San Francisco. In addition to governments and what would later become member states, non-governmental organizations were invited to assist in the drafting of a charter. It was a heroic effort. And on October 24, 1945, thanks in large part to the leadership of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, that charter became a reality and the United Nations was officially formed. 50 years ago, inspired by the United Nations and its ambitious charter, Adlai Stevenson II, a Unitarian Universalist who had recently been named ambassador to the United Nations by President John F. Kennedy, contacted Unitarian Universalist President Dana Greeley to urge the establishment of a volunteer envoy system to communicate the values of liberal religion on a global stage. Greeley immediately saw the wisdom of adding our voices to those of other faith traditions, and as a result, the UUA General Assembly adopted its first general resolution on the United Nations. Stevenson urged that the UUA establish an active presence for UUs within New York's international community, and the rest, as they say, is history.
From the beginning, the United Nations Charter read like a Unitarian Universalist wish list, saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war, faith in human rights, equal rights for men, women, and children, justice and freedom. All are present in the Charter. It just made sense that a relatively small denomination like ours should seize the opportunity to make our voices heard in what most of us think of as the last best hope for living together with tolerance, protecting our planet, and maintaining peace and security for all people. It's never easy, but the alternatives are just not acceptable. We needed to be present. We needed to be heard.
Apart from the Roosevelts, Adlai Stevenson, and Dana Greeley, I credit Reverend Homer Jack and Elizabeth Swayze, who worked together to coordinate our advocacy with the U.S. government in Washington, D.C., and at the United Nations here in New York. We were first located at Community Church in Manhattan, and later at the UN Church Center on UN Plaza, where we continue to operate today. The UUA Office of Social Responsibility used these offices to promote world peace, human rights, disarmament, health, and social issues on very meager budgets. We continue to do more with less, to speak out on the tough issues like HIV/AIDS, the rights of women, sexual orientation and gender identity human rights, freedom of choice, reproductive health, and hunger and climate change. We speak truth to power in ways to get them to listen.
Even though the United Nations is headquartered in New York City, it is a truly international body, as is our UUNO. Over the past 50 years, Canadian Unitarian Universalists have played key roles in the establishment and in some of the most significant achievements of our United Nations office. We were among the first representatives to the UN Economic and Social Council. We were privileged to be in Rome to help pull together the provisions of the Rome Statute regarding protection of women. And we are especially honored to take part in the faith-based caucus led by Elaine Harvey that brought about the International Criminal Court, which prosecutes the most heinous crimes against humanity. Canadians have played a pivotal and outsized role in the United Nations office, and we are particularly proud for all that we have done and all that we have done together.
I was hired as executive director in 2008 after serving as a U.S. diplomat with the Department of State for 25 years throughout the world. My UUNO position allowed me to speak out on issues that needed to be addressed. We have a wonderful UN Millennium Development Demonstration Project in Ghana called Every Child is Our Child, a program to support AIDS orphans with health care and education in coordination with the Mayakrobo Queen Mothers Association. And we took a strong stand to support Reverend Mark Kiemba in his opposition to the Ugandan Kill the Gays bill. We succeeded against all odds to get sexual orientation and gender identity human rights onto the agenda of the UN NGO Human Rights Conference in Paris, to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that was in 2008. Due to our continuing efforts, the UN has gone from apathy on this subject to putting in place personnel, policies, and programs in all of its agencies and becoming a global advocate with regular speeches from the UN Secretary General and the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, promoting equal rights regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity. The UUNO's phenomenal success in this area has catapulted it into leadership roles in support of the International Criminal Court, disarmament, peace and security, sustainable development, climate change issues, and all aspects of human rights, including migrant rights, indigenous peoples' rights, women's rights, and more. This is what your office has done and can continue to do with your support.
Good morning. I'm Dan Neuspiel, the president of your fellowship. Please join me and Diego Vargas in reading our spoken covenant, which should appear on your screen. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine. My country's skies, tis of thee, O sweet land of liberty, and sunlight beams on clover
Good morning. My name is Francoise Yohalem, and I am the co-chair of your care team. This is a very special moment in our service today when we share our joys and concerns. If you have a joy or concern you want to share with us today, please post it in the chat box. In the future, you may email them to Tom Rosiello. After each joy or concern, I will place a candle in this bowl of water. First, I want to send our condolences and deep healing thoughts to all the families of the victims of the horrific condo collapse in Surfside, Florida. I know that many of you have been concerned about John Wolfe and her husband, John. This is what I have just received from John. John is still with us this morning, day 14 of his transition. He's amazing. It is a precious time of peace and love, since fortunately he is pain and stress-free. 2 caretakers and I take turns being with him, so he's never alone. We are very grateful for the kind messages, errands, visits, flowers, and food offerings from so many in our wonderful UUFSMA community. Thank you. This candle is for Joan and John. A message from Harriet Finkelstein, who is asking for our prayers for her friend Susan Craig, who has entered hospice care. This is for Susan. Now I want to share a couple of messages from Cliff. The first one is a message of joy and pride. It was 50 years ago that the New York Times began publication of the Pentagon Papers, revealing the government lies that had allowed the US war on Vietnam to continue. 4 months later, our UU Beacon Press bravely published the Pentagon Papers at great legal and financial risk. It is a joy to remember that Unitarian Universalists played an important role in asserting the First Amendment freedom of the press and bringing an end to what had then been our country's longest war. This is a candle. Second message, we are horrified and saddened by the ongoing discoveries in Canada of hundreds of unmarked graves at the site of multiple former residential schools for Indigenous children forcibly separated from parents, where they were abused in a supposed effort to make them assimilate into Canadian society. And this is the last candle of sorrow for the Canadian Indigenous children. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Judy Rosenthal. One of the groups our fellowship helps to support is Mujeres en Cambio. Mujeres had a challenging year during the 2020 pandemic, but the girls met the challenge. Mujeres assisted 169 girls with scholarships, graduating 21 from junior high, 35 from high school, and 17 from university. All the female students maintained a GPA between 8 and 10. Classes were held online, and students shared computers and iPhones. The education of girls brings great benefits to society, even helping the climate crisis. A recent study found that women with a higher level of education beyond the 8th grade marry later, have fewer and healthier children, live longer, and enjoy greater economic prosperity. In developed countries like the US, having one child less reduces carbon dioxide emissions by 58.6 tons. Mujeres en Cambio remained an all-volunteer organization during the pandemic. There was no staff to pay or offices to rent. Volunteers handed out scholarships in person 4 times a year. They were able to distribute scholarships safely by using the outdoor terrace of the Instituto de Allende, 8 girls at a time with masks and physical distancing. Raising money was also a challenge this year. Because there could be no in-person fundraising events, our last one was the Carnival in February 2020, Mujeres had online events, and then they reached out to individual members for donations. It was a great achievement that not a single student was let go because of lack of funds. For over 26 years, our UU Fellowship has continued to be a financial support to the education of these girls from 40 poor rural communities in the greater San Miguel area. This year, despite the closure of schools, you can be assured that each peso we donate will go directly to the girls. Please give generously. Our service will resume after the offertory music.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and by this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and by this we live.
As chair of the United Nations Office Advisory Board, I had the unique experience of traveling to Ghana with my wife Mary and with UUA leadership to observe the Every Child is Our Child program firsthand. It was a moving experience. To witness the life-saving care and educational support provided by the Queen Mothers Association was truly amazing. While we were there, we met with public health and education officials and with the leaders of UNICEF in Ghana. They all told us the same thing. The Every Child program is a model of sustainable compassion and a true best practice. Mary and I have never been more proud of what our denomination has accomplished and is accomplishing every day in Ghana. This is exactly what the United Nations had envisioned for the Millennium Development Goals, and our United Nations office is leading the way.
In recognition of the UN office's leadership, Knotts was named chair of the United Nations NGO Committee on Human Rights. And in 2012, its 50th anniversary, the UUA Board of Directors, the Canadian Unitarian Council, and the UNO Board of Directors all voted unanimously to merge the United Nations office back to its home within the UUA. After 50 years of advocacy and service, our UN office homecoming was the best anniversary gift that any of us could imagine. So it's a truly happy and hopeful 50th anniversary, but let it also be a renewal of our commitment to the dream of world peace and to our best hopes for a better life for all. Even though we may be few in numbers, we've proven that the courage of our convictions, the passion we share for our issues, and the compassion we have for the plight of others can make a difference, a world of difference, in a world that needs us now more than ever.
In our videos and in the order of service, you have heard and read some of the multitude of ways Bruce Knotts has spent a lifetime working for peace and the betterment of humanity around the world. He spent his early days as a Peace Corps volunteer, followed by years of diplomatic assignments in Greece, Zambia, India, Pakistan, Kenya, Sudan, Côte d'Ivoire, and Gambia. And then he began directing the Unitarian Universalist Association office at the United Nations in 2008, where he continues to the present. It is my great honor to welcome Bruce Knotts to speak to us today about the worst of times, opportunities for human rights.
I'm delighted to be with you on the anniversary of American independence from the British Empire. I'm speaking from Roosevelt Island, New York City, on the traditional land of the Lenape people. I'd like to quote a few lines from a speech delivered by Frederick Douglass on the 76th anniversary of American independence. It's no secret that Frederick Douglass was no fan of July 4th. Quote, "What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he has been a constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sound of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass flaunting and impudence. Your shout of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes that would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour." Of course, for white men, the story was somewhat different. In our early elections, women could not vote, indigenous people couldn't vote, slaves at that time and incarcerated people today are counted for the purposes of representation in Congress and for the Electoral College to elect our presidents, but they can't vote or couldn't vote in those days. Men who didn't own property couldn't vote. We have worked hard over the course of our time as a nation to expand the enfranchisement of voters, and yet we still fall short. The progress we have made, and perhaps the progress every nation makes, comes from struggle, hardship, danger, and conflict. The drive to change the status quo seldom comes in good times of peace and plenty. Change comes when your back is against the wall and you're scared that you and your family may not make it through the crisis that you face. World War II was such a time. which fostered the end of the colonial rule, the United Nations, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Times are bad now. The pandemic, the rise of authoritarianism, religious nationalism, racial nationalism, white supremacy. As bad and as scary as this time can be, it gives us an opportunity for change. You can feel that we are in an inflection point on race. We've been here before and failed. At the end of the Civil War, we passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. People of color voted, ran for office, were elected, served with distinction. Then, about 10 years later, due to a compromise to settle a very close presidential election in 1877, federal troops were removed from the states formerly in rebellion. Very quickly, voting rights were withdrawn, not on account of race, as that would be illegal, so other grounds were invented to prevent all people of color from voting or otherwise participating in the governments of the states formerly in rebellion. These voter suppression measures didn't mention race, but the effect was to keep Black and brown people from the polls. These states became one-party states with authoritarian governments. Voter suppression continues to this day. We had another chance nearly 100 years later in the 1965 Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, and the Immigration Reform Act, which were passed and signed by President Lyndon Johnson. However, over the years since 1965, we have allowed the courts and state governments to dismantle these three important legislative actions for justice. We need to work again, and this time we need to make enfranchisement both global and permanent. Everyone deserves a safe and dignified life. Everyone needs to be heard and have basic needs of health, safety, food, water, shelter, education, and support for family and community life. We are facing a climate change crisis. I admire Naomi Klein's book, and I'm glad it was mentioned earlier, Climate versus Capitalism, This Changes Everything. Naomi Klein talks about our disposable culture, which disposes of our waste in the air, in the water, land, and elsewhere. We also dispose of people we consider less than ourselves. This wasteful, disposable culture must be replaced by a culture of conservation where we preserve, recycle, and protect people and resources, recognizing the value of everyone and everything in the natural world. World War I and World War II gave us the chance to change the world. The Treaty of Versailles definitely changed the world, and so has the United Nations since World War II. The mere fact of moving from a world that was mostly colonized to one that was mostly decolonized is a huge change and insufficiently appreciated. The Treaty of Versailles was based on self-determination of European national groups. This was probably a bad decision. The United Nations decolonized the world, which is progress, but it also gave veto power to Russia, China, the United States, United Kingdom, and France and the UN Security Council. I believe that's a serious mistake. Keep these errors in mind. For better or for worse, we will have another opportunity to remake the world. I hope we ensure the sanctity of all life, plant, animal, human, life in the sea. We must protect and nurture forests, biodiversity of all types. We must insist on global equality, where everyone, everywhere can enjoy a safe and dignified life with all of the rights enumerated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The rights to health care, education, employment, housing, food, water, sanitation, freedom to choose our families, freedom of religion or belief, and all the rest. One human characteristic which can come about in times of trouble is mutual support. And I think of the Londoners who huddled in subway stations, helped each other during the Nazi bombings of London. I hope we can all bring our best selves to support each other as we struggle through the tough years ahead. I hope we also think and call on all the wisdom we can muster to create a more compassionate, caring, equal, inclusive, and diverse world which conserves and nurtures all the beauty and the biodiversity of the world. None of us wants to suffer through tragedy, but we all know that the tough times present opportunities that will never be available during good times. Look back at the United Kingdom and its experience in the Second World War. They came out of that experience by establishing the National Healthcare Service and ways to attain a better quality of life for British citizens. Nothing we design will be perfect. Let us not make the perfect the enemy of the good. However, since we face difficult times, let's face them with care and compassion for each other. Let's do what we can to leave this world in better shape than we found it. Those who don't learn from their mistakes are doomed to repeat them. We can no longer afford to repeat past mistakes. Our latitude for repeating mistakes is narrowed considerably. We must no longer think of ourselves as nations, races, religions, and ideologies. We need to think of ourselves as lucky inhabitants of this small, vulnerable planet. We must protect and preserve all life and systems on this planet. I have a good friend who directs the Seventh Generation Fund. It's an indigenous organization, and their goal is to plan for the next 7 generations. Let us take the long view and stop our short-term thinking. The stakes are large, and only long-term planning to save our planet will suffice. Let us commit ourselves to justice, equity, equality, diversity, inclusion, and respect for all life and all we have that sustains life. Let's leave this world better than we found it, and not just better, but transformed in significant and lasting ways, which will stand the test of time and adversity. John F. Kennedy committed the United States to landing a man on the moon. And he said, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Let us commit ourselves not to easy, comfortable lives in the midst of suffering. Let's commit ourselves to what's hard and what's necessary to save our planet and all the beautiful life it supports. Let's look at our principles and see what they mean. First principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. There are some that want to change this to say the inherent worth and dignity of every being, including animals. It certainly means that we have no right to disregard or ignore the needs of any sentient being. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, learning a lifetime commitment. Let us encourage each other to learn and grow. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The search for truth is never ending. Whenever we think we know it all, we find there's much more to learn. Many of us thought we knew American history. But we find with critical race theory that there is an entire history of racism in America which has been kept from our view. We know next to nothing about the glorious and tragic history of the indigenous civilizations of the Americas. We are woefully unaware of the contributions of women to our history. We are only beginning to learn about the contributions of Asians to our history. So even the most knowledgeable of us find ourselves with much to learn. Our best stance should always be to be humble and open to learning new things. It is tragic that there is terrible backlash against critical race theory. This is an academic construct which has existed for decades, where discussions can take place about looking at our history and society through the lens of race, in the same manner as we look at America's social, economic, political, and scientific history. In addition to race, we need to look at American history through the lens of gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and through many other lenses. It is offensive that anyone would participate and demonstrate to advocate for not learning something. Reminds me of the Know Nothing Party, which together with the Whig Party founded the modern Republican Party. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process in our congregations and in society at large. Democracy is in real danger in the United States and across the world. Many US states are working to suppress access to voting in a country which has a history of voter suppression and exclusion. Social media and disinformation campaigns by authoritarian governments are designed to weaken democracies and push them into the authoritarian camp. Many elections are worthless shams, such as in Belarus. The Communist Party of China, where there are no democratic elections of any type at any level, makes the point very strongly that democracy brings chaos and suffering, and that their style of authoritarian government brings prosperity and harmony. I've watched China increase its brutality and enhanced authoritarianism a great deal over the past recent years. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. All of these are necessary for our world. We desperately need peace. We have far too little of it. We don't have peace at home in our political life, and too many wars, famines, repressions are taking place around the world. We are threatened by the ever greater likelihood of a nuclear conflict, which would end existence on our small planet. We need the liberty to be our authentic selves in safety. Most of us need justice. Police who kill people they detain for minor violations must be held accountable. Women who are abused deserve justice that will pierce the protections of clergy, wealth, political power, and the rest that protect perpetrators from being held accountable. And finally, respect for the interweb of existence of which we are a part. All that exists needs to be protected. The earth, land, air, water, mountains, trees, rivers, all the elements and biodiversity of this planet need protection. The earth is not ours to use and abuse. It is a fragile planet which must be protected and cared for if it will be able to continue to sustain life. We can't think of this as something that belongs to us. The earth belongs to itself, and all that exists here depends on it to continue. It won't last forever. But unfortunately, we could make this planet unable to sustain life far sooner than it would be the case if we took better care of our blue boat home. So we are living in tough times. It is often only in such times that meaningful change can happen. Let's finally end systematic racism and colonialist thinking. Let's think globally and put aside Eurocentric thinking. Look at what we know and what we study about ancient Greece, Rome, the Renaissance in Europe, European colonialism, and more. Look at what we miss. The Mayan civilization may have been the greatest our species has ever developed, and we know very little about it. Think of what we might have gained as the peoples of the Americas, Africa, Asia, and elsewhere if they had been able to develop, innovate, and grow without European colonialism. Let's look for the good that may reside in our differences. Let us respect and celebrate our differences and learn from each other. I'll close with wisdom from my African American husband, Isaac Humphrey, who is the lead producer of New York Fashion Week. Isaac loves culture. He adores European, especially French culture. He loves Japanese culture and all the rest. All he asks of others is that they show the same interest and curiosity about his African American culture as he shows for the cultures of others. We have much to learn from each other, and in learning together, we will solve the problems that we face. Respect, love, curiosity, humility, interest, and thirst for justice will carry us forward in these tough times. With lots of effort and a bit of luck, we'll end in a better place than we are now. Thank you for your attention. And I think we're going to move on to sing hymn 318.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which finds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service with love and justice, strive to make us free.
Naomi Klein has pointed out that shocks have often been used to push societies backwards. True. But they have also been moments when we have leapt forwards. We extinguish the flame of the chalice, but hold the light within to guide us to repair the world. And now we will listen to a song about children's human rights.